Oh, boy.
So, welcome to another
Me too.
episode. All right. So, I guess, just to sum up what we were talking about, Laura ruined my life.
One day at a time. It is my goal in life to make your life miserable.
And while one daughter likes her, my other daughter can't stand her. And I think we'll just leave it at that for today. All right.
That's lovely.
So I thought today would be a good time to talk about the collaborative model. And you have a bit of a following, Shauna, in terms of like people following those articles. Like I've read them. I don't fully understand it, still. So I guess Laura, you and I could sort of tag team on questions here. So I guess the first question for me would be, collaborative model, from what I understand, is a way or a method of assisting special needs student in a school environment, correct?
Partially.
Okay. Well, explain it to me.
Now, I am not an expert here, and this is only based off of the very little bit of info I was given from our district, and then what I was able to find online and through other sources. So we actually refer to ours as the Collaborative Consultative Model. And what that is for us is that kids, regardless of like whether they have IEPs or 504s or whatever, they are in a gen ed classroom with the main classroom teacher and then a special ed teacher. There may or may not be paraprofessionals or other aides in the room. At the high school level, and I can't say for the middle school because I don't have a kid in the middle school, but at the high school level, that special ed teacher splits their time between two different gen ed classes. So that's what it means for us. Like I said, I'm not so sure. It gets confusing because we've done, like at the younger grades in particular, when my kids were at Mountain Park, they always had kids, who were in the room that had either paras or IEPs, and my own, I have one who has an IEP as well. But it was 2019 when he was finishing 8th grade, going into 9th, and his case manager said, let's talk about the transition to the high school. And then this was kind of like sprung on us that, oh, by the way, your kid doesn't get the same resource room class that they had. They'll be gen ed. And she didn't really have much more information than that. It was just sort of okay, here we go. This is what we're doing. Yay, like our district likes to do.
Shauna, is this
Go ahead,
model,
Laura.
is this model, I know there was a lot of talk. This is a newer model that's been implemented for the special education students, or have we always operated using this, I guess, implementation of support services for students in the middle school and high school?
As far as I can tell, it's new for the middle and high school. 2019 going into the 2020-2021 school year was new.
Okay.
I said, at the elementary level, we've always, well, maybe not always, but since we moved here, which was 2015, it had been happening at the elementary school level. I believe some kids got pull-out support, like taken out of the classroom for various things, depending on, need. But, it's a little confusing even for me, even having a kid who has an IEP.
What was the difference between then and now?
So for us in particular, my child's IEP said they were not to be placed in the gen ed classroom. For us, it was specifically for math, because,
This is then? You're talking about then?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's what the IEP said in 8th grade. And then all of a sudden that went out the window and my child was placed in the gen ed classroom, and then COVID hit. So that was lovely and fun. And, it was kind of a mess for a couple of years. And it took me a couple of years to realize what a problem it was, because we were home and we had the virtual learning, and it was, but eventually when he went back to school, when we restarted the person, and I wasn't there at home watching what was going on and kind of doing the lessons alongside, that's when it really, really fell apart. When my child went back into the classroom with that halftime special ed teacher, and boy, oh boy, did it fall apart. So that started my kind of fight with the district. And
Shauna, could you, just for if we have anybody watching who is maybe new to the world or how our district handles the special ed department, can you just kind of tell people the difference between a 504 and an IEP? Because I think there's a lot of confusion surrounding what exactly that is and how you qualify. I don't personally, I don't know if there's a lot of information for people who may be at the lower levels, who don't have an intervention from school, who might, kind of be at home struggling with, this doesn't seem normal. What do I do? And how to maybe get their foot in their door, so to speak.
Yeah. I do not know the difference between an IEP and a 504. I am not the right person to ask that question of. For us, the way we got started, I had homeschooled for 2 years in New York City because services there are non-existent pretty much. When we moved here and we re-enrolled in school, it was pretty simple. I said, I would like to have an evaluation done for my child. It was, at least for us, it was easy. It was painless. They called in the child study team and they did their evaluation. And from start to finish, it was no more than maybe 4 or 5 weeks that they had the evaluation done, and we had our IEP in place. So the district was really responsive and great with that. And I'm sorry, I don't know the difference between IEP and 504.
Well, according to Google, a 504 is geared towards ensuring a student is equitable access to a learning environment, where an IEP focuses on, I guess, direct services like an occupational therapist or a speech therapist. Mm-hmm. And then it looks like for a 504, it could go for kids from K to 12, where an IEP goes early as 3 and then as late as 21. So, I mean, that's what Google says.
Okay. And I believe the acronym stands for Individualized Educational Plan or something.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I've heard parents. So I've early on, I don't know where things are now. Early on, I've heard some parents love this model, and other parents having a lot of, and I think with everything else, the way it was rolled out was kind of, again, polarizing. What where does it work well, and where does it fall apart in your mind, Shauna? The model that we have today.
I do know parents whose kids thrive with this model. Unfortunately, mine did not and does not. I'm just going to kind of pull some notes over here. I'm going to bring in that Hattie's list of 252 influences at this point, because
I'm going to open that up too.
Yeah. The kids who have 504s and IEPs, there's a lot that they can gain by being in the regular classroom. It is a positive influence. Nowhere on that list. So it's John Hattie, and he came up with this list of influences. There you go. The average of the positive influences was 0.4. And there are some you see that are a lot higher, some that are a little lower. They're all positive, but that was just kind of his list. And I found it interesting. So they are positive, and it does have positive things. But if you scroll all the way down, you'll see at the very bottom that co or team teaching is a positive influence of 0.19. But where I think this falls apart is if you go way to the end in the red, in the negative influences, there's one that says if students feel disliked.
Yes, here it is.
And for some kids, being in the mainstream classroom, it becomes very apparent if they're having trouble following along, if the special ed teacher is kind of like hovering, because sometimes they need the special ed teacher to hover, but it puts the spotlight on them in a negative way. And I think that can be a really huge drawback. And that student feeling disliked is a negative 0.19. So for some kids, I feel like it's kind of a wash or even a negative. And when the district did a survey, they did a survey, I believe, late 2021 or early 2022, and they never showed us the full results, but they did only went out to special ed parents, but I don't know if their survey. Some of the kids' comments were, I feel stupid in this class. I'm afraid to ask questions, you know, that kind of thing. And that just breaks my heart because that's where we were.
Okay. So, you know, as you're talking, I feel like there was what comes to mind, or like when I started in my career early on in my field, there, and I don't, and again, I don't think that I'm not suggesting that we're talking about the same thing. I'm just talking about the mechanics of it. There was this whole movement to sort of deinstitutionalize chronically mentally ill, and again, I'm not suggesting that special needs students fall into that category, but it was this idea of mainstreaming and bringing people back into sort of the community. And the concern really at the time was when they were doing this, there was no supports in place. They just kind of set up these loose centers throughout cities to deal with that. And those centers became, and I worked in one of them, you know, it was my first job after graduate school, and it was an abject failure. I mean, it led to, like, at least during the time period I was working that run, homelessness and all sorts of things. And I feel like systems have a tendency sometimes to try to use inclusion as a mechanism for cost cutting, you know? And I think we also saw that with the reconfiguration. Like when everybody was pushing the reconfiguration, there was this bizarre argument the district made about best practice and it being for the needs of students, when configurations have nothing to do with any of that. They primarily have to do with cost savings. And the configurations, what the research starts suggesting is that more frequent configuration changes actually leads to less academic achievement. And actually, Forager did a research study a while back on school changes too. So I feel like a lot of this stuff, man, I don't think it's just our district, but a lot of districts are pushing out as, this is great for the kids, is really code word, like we're going to save money, you know, and kind of label this under the umbrella of something nice and warm that people can sort of get behind. And I don't know if that's what's true for this, but man, it feels very like deja vu, you know?
I think it goes back to the failure. The failures are so pronounced because I think we see that the administration and the board together, you know, boast always about that we're here for the kids and we want to meet, you know, I've heard the phrase, we want to meet the kids where they're at and support them from wherever that is, you know, in their lives on the learning scale. However, for me, if the, you know, I'm going to call it big thinking classrooms. If this model isn't working for even
Shauna, go after her. Go after her, Shauna.
Building
right down the street. Don't tempt her. My point is that, and I've tried to make it before, that like if one student is struggling in a particular program that's been pushed out, then let's figure out what those failures might be, because likely if there's one, there's more. And their neglect to address even the one student who's having a problem is where I get most angry, because at the end of the day, like, this is the only thing in my mind that they should be focused on. Like, is every student, you know, given their toolbox for success? And in this case, it sounds like, you know, Shauna, for your son, and I'm sure other children, that there's some shortcomings that need to be addressed.
Yeah. You know, I struggle with the whole, whether it's cost cutting or cost savings or not. I was told by Varley that it's actually more expensive to do the collaborative consultative model than it was before. And I don't completely buy that because previously we had, and it's again very math specific for my child, in sixth through eighth grade, he was in a class that had anywhere from 5 to maybe 10, 11 students in it. Well, we've also heard Varley say that those classes are not cost effective and can't run them. So I'm having a hard time reconciling, well, it costs us more money to put everybody in gen ed versus, oh, it's just absolutely, catastrophic if we have a class of 5 students. We can't possibly do that. So what's the truth there? I don't know.
Well, what would be really expensive, and this is why we go to extremes, is a middle ground where, Sai brought up, this is this is the first time she ran for a campaign, and her and I got to talking a little bit about this. In many European countries, the money follows the child. Like in the US, it's about programs and schools, and money is sort of allocated according to initiatives. It's very top, where in other cultures and in other countries, dollars follow the specific needs of the kid. And I think you see the differences in terms of our scores compared to other countries, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like a lot of people criticize, for example, China's education system, yet when you look at kids who are not part of the country, like immigrants to that country, they actually get a lot of support and services compared to our kids. From what I don't know about Berkeley Heights. I am not speaking about the Berkeley Heights district in this moment. I'm talking about other school districts in New Jersey, where I have clients and folks that I work with who are either, who are in that sort of field of kids who are coming in from other countries. And man, I mean, the support and services they get is incredibly lacking. And that's because it's about the program and the priority of the program versus the needs of the kid, right? If it followed the needs of the kid, there'd be a lot of support around that kid. But because ESL as an example is a low priority, it's funded programmatically low, and it's given a programmatically low priority, right? So I think the issue really comes down to, we go to these extremes of like out of the class, or this model, and this weird lack of middle ground that either way a portion of kids get booted out, or it doesn't work for them. And I think it comes down to this one size fits all American philosophy to education. That's just my own that's just been my sort of anecdotal experience.
Yeah. So interestingly, number one negative for kids is having ADHD. It is a negative 0.90.
For the consultative model?
No, just overall.
On this thing. I'm sorry. Yes. Okay.
Patty's list. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So I think it's really key that, for our students who have ADHD, that we take another look at maybe how we're instructing them, to kind of try and, if you look up that list, interventions for students with learning needs is a positive 0.77. So we know that interventions work. But if you compare, and like responses to interventions is a 1.29. So we know the interventions work. And we know that although collaborative learning was at a 0.34, mainstreaming or inclusion was at a 0.27, and then co or team teaching was a 0.19. So while those are all positive, they're not as positive. And if you look at the very top, the number one thing that helps students, that has the most influence on students, it is collective teacher efficacy. It is when you have good teachers.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just the other thing that I found interesting, and this is kind of a side note, it doesn't have to do with ADHD or anything else, but really high on the list was self-reported grades coming in at a 1.33. And I had to look that up because I had no idea what it was.
What does that mean?
So it means if you ask a student to kind of rank themselves or grade themselves, and they say, okay, here's where I think I am. And then if they're able to show improvement on that, and they, so they say, oh, I think I'm going to get a C on this test, and then they get a B that has an incredibly positive influence on them.
Oh,
I
that's
just-
great. Yeah, that's actually, I wouldn't even think about that. That's pretty neat.
So anyway, but so maybe, I don't know, maybe another look at our interventions, behavioral interventions, that kind of thing, as opposed to the idea. I mean, inclusion is great. And like I said, there are some kids who are really, really doing well with it, but I don't think it should be the only thing. And I feel like right now it's kind of the main thing that our district is focused on.
What I would like to see when I'm looking at this, and I don't know if you and I would disagree on this, Shauna, I suspect we might. With ADHD, I'd almost like to blow this out and recreate this list, but then include pharmacological intervention
It's in there.
to see. Where's the pharmacological?
ADHD drugs, positive influence of 0.32. If you go,
That's, and as I guess this would only relate to, I mean, this number would be based only on that sort of cohort, right? I would imagine.
I would imagine.
I mean,
yeah.
it's diffused by the general population, obviously.
Yeah.
That 0.32.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Anything else you would like to share about the model, Shauna?
Just that. So after we had our, realization moment that this was bad, it took from, I don't know whenever it was, March, that we went back, almost an entire year. And I did try to follow the right.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, going to the teacher, going to the special ed teacher, going to the caseworker, going to, following those paths. And the whole time that you're doing that, because it takes time, your kids' grades slipping. They're falling further and further behind. So it got to the point where, I sort of blew up at the BOE and Varley, and, was like,
I think we have a clip of that, actually, but go ahead.
because it's your kid, this is your kid.
Yeah, no, I get it.
As a result, they finally re-implemented the resource room class for math.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And, he's doing as well as can be expected. I don't hover. I don't have to oversee anything. He has good, better, and worse, I get the occasional email like, hey, not doing homework here. But overall, he's not failing. Which was what was happening with the collaborative consultative model.
What would you tell a parent who's struggling with the model?
Be vocal. You got to be vocal.
Like vocal, like you show up at a BOE meeting? Is there a contact person? Like, what is it?
You can, going through the proper channels got me nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
It got me nowhere. And it wasn't until I blew up, went in, had a meeting. I said, I'm recording this meeting. You help me out or I'm going to go get an advocate. As soon as you say advocate, everybody freaks out.
Yeah, they get nervous. Yeah.
Yeah. But it took blowing things up. Unfortunately, you have to blow shit up.
Now,
I got for that.
I'm also curious to hear what your experience has been. And again, if you don't mind sharing this, I mean, I know this is personal, but sort of the intersection between building thinking classroom, consultative model, special needs, that sort of like I mean, have you had do you feel like there is I guess when you think about the synergy behind all that, is there, like, what have you observed?
I'm not entirely sure what your question is, honestly.
Well, so we have building thinking classroom math,
right.
You have consultative model. I mean, these are all different approaches that we've taken to sort of teaching or learning.
Gotcha. Okay.
And sort of the impact, do you feel like that's sort of
all I can tell you is that consultative collaborative model combined with building the thinking classroom is like my worst nightmare.
Okay. And so that's kind of where I was trying to get to, like, how does it end up sort of amplifying what's not good?
Well, for us, we are not part of I do have a child who's in a building thinking classroom room. The one with the IEP is not, because the resource room classroom is a very small class taught by only a special ed teacher. But yeah, to combine those things for the students who have that combined, holy cow.
Why? Good. Like, why is it not good?
I don't know, maybe some of them are thriving, but I kind of don't see how that could happen, because if you have a student who needs directions broken down into smaller steps, if you have a child who needs a lot of repetition, if you have a child who needs, none of that happens when they're working in groups of 3 with their peers.
All right.
You're basically leaving it up to the peers to follow the kid's IEP. I mean, it's sort of a mess there.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was trying to figure out, like, because it does feel like a very loose way of teaching, and you combine that with this. I mean, I have follow-up questions to that, but that's going to get too in the weeds. All right, so that was great, Shauna. Thank you. You guys want to dive into the budget a little bit or no?
Oh yeah.
All right. So,
Hold on. I have a very, very pressing matter.
yeah.
My son made some artwork during this recording that he would like me to show on air because he wants to be YouTube famous,
Okay.
like us. All right, that's the first one. Oh, wait.
That's from Mario. That's Super Mario.
That is. Good job. And this is just, what is this? A frozen emoji? Frozen emoji.
That's a good one.
Sounds like John Leo, right? Okay.
He looks like
And
John
that's
Leo.
Mario.
Mario here.
All right.
God.
I thought that was great. You did that freehand?
Yes.
That's awesome, dude.
He's my little artist.
Fantastic. Oh wait, can I do a budget segue from the?
Yes.
The
Go.
budget segue.
From the drawings.
Remember when Mrs. Bradford questioned whether we needed the expensive digital programs for math?
Yes.
While tech in math is ranked as a positive, it is below the average for what is good for students. So let's ditch it.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
But-
there's been questions about technology, and I feel like we just throw our. This has been going on. This is even this predates Marley even. We just threw money in technology without really without any consideration as to how to best use it. I think technology plays an incredibly important role in education, but I feel like we've been so like just whatever's there we threw money at, what there was like this whole thing with flat screen TVs at CMS. I'm not sure what that's about or how many were purchased and what utility there. I mean, there might be a good utility. I don't know. But the budget meeting is coming up this Friday. And I think this is the final one, or maybe
It's Thursday. I think
Thursday.
it's Thursday.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, Thursday.
Although I'm sure they would schedule it on a Friday night because they don't want people there. Sorry.
Well,
Try not to be too
Thursday, there's
negative.
actually, hold on. What's scheduled on Thursday is actually, I think, a concert or something. Hold on.
Probably. Graduation, maybe.
Or they scheduled a BOE meeting when there was a band concert. Yeah.
Well, and they've also scheduled a BOE meeting on one of the snow give back days. And they're also conveniently, it's the night of the Educator of the Year ceremony. So for all the K through 8 teachers who are receiving an accolade that evening, they're going to have the day off, but then have to come to GL for the meeting, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, so there's a
Ridiculous.
concert on Thursday night from 7 to 9.
There you go. Is it at GL?
I think it's CMS. I
Well,
believe so. Yeah.
The CMS concerts are usually at GL at the high school in the auditorium,
Oh, okay. So then I'll just walk over.
except that it's at the same,
Huh?
it's at the same time. So you can't be in 2 places at once, even if it is at the high
The
school.
BOE meeting. The BOE meeting last time ran until like. How long was it? People were there till like 10 or something, wasn't that? Or no?
Yeah, the last one was very long, but
I guess the thing that's infuriating to me about the budget is that there's still no real discussion on eliminating central administration positions. There was no real discussion on lawyers and how much we're spending. And it's become a debate around teachers, supervisors, and secretaries, So So I don't really have a lot of hope for what's going to happen on the 28th. I know that people don't think the transfers are a big deal. I feel like when you're starting to charge activity fees, you're starting to talk about cutting teachers. I think found money is a big deal, and how it was used is, but that's for another
Huge big deal.
time. Huh?
Well, did you see now that the football parents are having to fundraise to buy their helmets and equipment? It's a huge big deal.
Did they have to do that before or no?
It's their first annual. So
Their first annual fund.
I mean,
They won't even talk about that. They won't even. It won't even. Not the parents, but I mean, like, so like decisions already made. Are they operating as if this budget's already approved?
Well, most teams do some level of fundraising, but this seems like it's been amped up, probably due to the budget cuts in the athletic department. So now the parents have to kick in the extra, and the town has to kick in the extra.
Well, I mean, let's see if parents show up. The other thing that came up this week, I think what Laura wrote about it, was sort of the rankings or the ratings across town and where Berkeley Heights fell. So Laura, it's where we're like, I guess Chatham, New Providence, all those guys ended up being like ahead of us.
Yeah, I mean, I am not like a mathematician or anything, but if you kind of like took the cumulative scores that they were, so like schools were rated based on their composition. And then I think that was, I'm forgetting it now. So there was a score, and then there's
a summative score and a rating. Yes, right.
And like a rating. So they were kind of one and the same, but the score kind of rated the schools based on some sort of attribute that was similar, and then the other one was just rating, okay, your high school that serves freshmen through seniors. So I tried to kind of do some comparison between, I don't know why I had so many kids. I was trying to do a comparison between some
lack of self-control, Laura.
Clearly. Shauna spitting on her mind. It's out of control.
These are all the consequences of your decisions floating around you right now.
Bad choices.
You're a bad choice.
So what I was saying is that, now that we're allowed to, according to Pam, we're not allowed to compare ourselves to any other school district.
Except the ones that make us look okay.
Right. But if you compare us kind of, I went back to, I think Cy shared it weeks ago when we were talking about the budget before the budget. Yep. New Providence's, they had the bar graph about cost per pupil. So I was kind of looking, and we were in this 50, like the high 50s, all the way up to 60. I mean, like our highest grade was, hilariously enough, from Columbia Middle School, and that was a 74. So, and these were based on data that the district has to send to the state. So it was, I'm losing my goddamn mind.
Right, but it was hard data. This was hard data.
This was our data that we provided.
Which is different than niche, right? If you saw niche,
right.
Everyone was blaring how we got an A. Now, the thing with niche is, so the patch stuff was all based on sort of quantifiable data, like tests and stuff like that.
Correct.
Niche, half of that stuff is like a Facebook
popularity
poll.
Contest.
Right. It's like basically people coming in and saying, "I love my town," but I don't see that this article being trumpeted around anywhere, which is interesting to me.
Well, it makes us look awful. And the fact that our cost per pupil is still the highest. I mean, you've got like Milburn, Chatham, Summit, New Providence, all these districts did better than, I mean, some of them were not great, but some of them were, had like what I would attribute to a B or an A rating. So my whole thing is like, if these districts can do a better job by spending less money, then what the hell are we doing with this $63 million budget? Like, it just makes you question,
maybe they're spending
like,
more of their money on teachers and not on administrators. I mean, like, look at what we're spending our money on. I mean, that's I think it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, right? It doesn't make sense, like highest per pupil cost, lowest performance, but when you look at where the dollars are spent, it makes a ton of sense as to why we're spending so much money and not performing well. Go ahead, Shauna. Oh, Shauna's having, yeah. Anyway, I think this is it, right? I think we've kind of talked about the budget for like 30 years. Does
did.
anybody else have anything else to say before we end this?
Not on budget, no.
Is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about before we close
I
this
do-
off?
Yes, I had something. You go first, Shauna.
Well, I have a question. So the budget, where are we right now? So the budget was sent, presumably with the supervisors still intact. It was sent to the county, correct? The
No,
county-
we don't know. We don't know what was. I don't know if the supervisors. I don't know if that budget included or didn't include the supervisors.
Well, given that they voted against giving the supervisors the X, I'm assuming that the supervisors are included. But then Varley said, well, then you have the teachers, you know.
Right.
So
I don't know what that budget includes. I
We
have
don't.
no idea what's in there. And it feels like they're already operating under a budget reality that nobody knows about yet.
okay.
Like it's almost as if they've already approved it internally and they're just gonna put on a show for us on Friday, pretending that they just come. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know what's going on, but I'm hearing a lot of things from the inside that decisions have already been sort of moving on or moving forward.
Well, a source told me that they hear one thing, they hear another thing. Nobody's able to verify anything, and they have no idea what's going on.
And you're right. And this is supposed to be a public budget. Like that's,
Yeah.
this. I mean, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But it's also sounding, sorry to cut you off. It's also sounding, I mean, that like people you would hope would have a hand in this, like principals, supervisors. I mean, that resolution was such a blow, and all the people that spoke that night, especially our beloved school principals, it seemed to me, and this is all me watching that meeting and absorbing it all. I have no, data to back this up. It seems to me like this was the first time they kind of heard what was going on too. So it's scared. It's like this, you think there's this big pool of people and all these heads are working together and you could kind of be like, all right, they're doing the best they can. But then when they're getting up and speaking against it, I'm wondering like, who's in the room? Is it really just like Robert and Angela and Joy and Melissa and Julie? Like, is that it? Because it feels like it's those.
I mean, this is the educational version of Office Space, where you have people coming in from the outside, taking over a district from the top, making all these decisions based on like buzzwords. And you have been people who've been in these schools teaching our kids for years who aren't part of this, or aren't part of the big decisions. And it's like, what's the name? What were your meeting with the Bobs? It's like every BOE meeting is like a meeting with the Bobs, Laura, what did you want to bring up?
I actually don't even know much about it. And maybe because I don't have a child yet at GL who is involved in sports, but a couple parents over the last few weeks have mentioned to me, I think it's called the option 2. So basically if your child plays a high school sport, several other districts around here, including Chatham, who we always get compared to, it's basically an option. It is not required, but is an option for students who take a sport because it takes up so much time that student could opt out of physical education, which is a requirement from the state, and take an elective or a study hall during the day. It is my understanding that Dr. Varley has been approached by several parents regarding this and is just even, the fact that we even heard about it at a board meeting, and the things I've heard from parents is that she just it's not even on the table, which upsets me. I mean, we're talking about, again, it goes back to what we said in the beginning, like, let's support the students how they need to be supported. And if students don't need 45 minutes of gym on top of 3 hours of sports, then let's figure out where we can make this work.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, I'll tell you, I would be all in favor because lacrosse is 3 to 5, sometimes slightly later. It is 5 days a week, 3 to 5, or again, like I said, slightly later, and Saturdays from 8 to 10, 8 to 11. And not only that, but the JV is expected to watch the varsity game. So I'll give you an example. My kid leaves for the bus at 7:04 a.m., went directly to Parsippany Hills yesterday, watched the varsity game because he's on JV, played the JV game, and was not home until 8:15 p.m. at night. So yeah, let's give these
You kind
kids
of need to cut them a break. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Laura.
You're welcome. It was funny. A couple parents this week were like, "Hey, the next time you do one of those things, can you talk about it?" And I think it's called option 2. I really don't know, but it's whatever that option is to. And again, it is optional. So if your kid like loved gym or all of their friends were in it,
I love gym.
you would take it.
Oh, fine,
But just providing students with the option.
The last thing I want to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That makes way too much sense for our district to do.
So I want to go back to enrollment numbers really quick, very, very quickly, which is like, I'm wondering how many kids. So I've talked to a couple of parents who were exploring the idea. I guess there's a way that you could send your kid to another school district and pay for it. Like, and so I've talked to parents exploring that. I've heard parents like moving their kids to private schools. We've been talking about low enrollment numbers. I would really love to see a piece of data or research kind of understanding or figuring out the exits, like what. So I don't know if some of the, I mean, I don't know why the enrollments are so low. I'd like to know why. And anecdotally, what I'm hearing a lot of parents basically losing confidence in the system. But I don't know how much that amounts to. It would just be interesting to see those numbers. I don't know what you guys have heard.
I don't know. Maybe we can Oprah them. We should get them by 2025.
I've asked for that. I don't think they
Data.
keep the data on that. I don't think they keep the data on students. They'll keep data on students exiting the school, but not the reasons why. So you can have kids like moving to North Dakota or something, and they'll be
Right.
piled in with the kids who are, All right. Well, this was another fascinating, interesting. I mean, we've talked about special needs. We've had some interesting artwork. We've talked about Laura's interference with my family. All right, have a good night, guys. Thanks.
Good
Thank you.
night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye. How do I end this? All right.